Hello, welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel we look at microfiche from the past, old newspaper articles in the public domain. We look at them with our modern eyes, our modern perspective, and see what we can learn from them. On this microfiche time capsule, we are looking back at the Biographical Encyclopedia, Volume 1, and this article is entitled Woodruff, Wilford. So having been the fourth president of the church, this person is relatively well known. So what do I know about him? He was converted, I believe, somewhere in the east, and he came to, I believe, Nauvoo, if I'm not mistaken, and which time he was called to the Quorum of the 12, and he was in kind of the second wave. I wouldn't say second wave, but he wasn't one of the original 12, but he was one of the oldest of the original group, that came from Nauvoo. Anyway, he had grown up with a series of accidents. He had a lot of near misses of nearly dying. And I wonder, I just have to ask the question because I wonder if that was caused by dyspraxia, because people who are dyspraxic are very clumsy. And I wonder if he was, or if it just was a coincidence. I'm not actually sure. So, I'm just throwing that in the room. I know that he was an avid journal keeper, and that his journals, in fact, there's a whole series on the church website called the Wilford Woodruff Papers, because he wrote stuff down. He wrote stuff down like nobody's business. And that means that it's a lot easier for us today to make sense of history because he wrote it down. So thank you, Wilford Woodruff, for writing so much down. In fact, the King Follett Discourse was written down by a couple different people, even officially. And Wilford Woodruff's version is probably the most complete if you read through the different versions. I've read a couple versions, and his version is really, really great. So he came to Salt Lake, and I think I have a few holes in my knowledge of what he did. And past that, all I know, he did served a couple missions. I believe he was one of the ones who went to Great Britain with Brigham Young and John Taylor. I'm fairly certain. He was called out by Brigham Young at one point blank, saying that he didn't work very hard on the mission. Now, I don't know about that. I think that, I'm sure that he was working hard, but Brigham Young felt that he needed to be called out. And Wilford Woodruff was very humble about it. He was just like, if I apologize if there's something I should have done that I didn't. And that was his response to being called out publicly, saying that he hadn't done very much on his mission. Obviously I wasn't there. I can't really say how much he did or didn't do, but anyways, it's just really interesting. He always struck me as a very humble person. He's probably most well known for the is it called the Second Manifesto, where they basically renounced polygamy. So as I understand it, they were really struggling. So John Taylor had to go into hiding at the end of his life so that he wouldn't get arrested. And he was trying really hard to keep the church going, and he didn't feel that, the leaders of the church being behind bars would be conducive to that. So he went into hiding, and Wilford Woodruff did as well. But Wilford Woodruff, after John Taylor's death, was still in hiding for a while. But he really agonized over what the saints were going through, and eventually he prayed about it, and he was like, Heavenly Father, what should I do? I don't know what the right thing is to do here. And basically the answer came back, you've suffered enough. You've gone through enough. The trial is over. Let it go. And so he came out with the manifesto of 1890, where he says that he didn't feel that polygamy should be practiced by the saints anymore. That doesn't mean they're going to renounce their polygamist marriages. And there was solidly a time of transition when, after he said this, and people actually accepted it, and they continued to have plural marriages, but except that they were actually officiated outside of the United States. And so that was their solution for a little while, until finally, I believe it was Joseph F. Smith who said, okay, that's enough. We said no more. Yeah. And started stopping that for real in like 1904. But that was after Wilford Woodruff's death in 1898. So, anyways, I find him a very interesting character. I feel like he was a person of very strong convictions. Like he felt like he knew what was right, and he would only do that what he felt was right. Yeah. The other thing is that I feel like he made a lot of changes in the church in general, and so it reminds me of a couple like future presidents of the church who made a lot of changes. For example, Spencer W. Kimball or Russell M. Nelson. Yeah. So anyways, I thought you might find that interesting. He's a doer, he's a changer, he's not afraid of change. And he loves history. So it's kind of a little bit of a dichotomy there. Anyways, let's go ahead and take a look at the article. It's a little bit long, so hopefully we won't be here all day, but yeah, let's just take a look and see what it has to say. Woodruff, Wilford, 4th President of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, was born March 1st, 1807, in Farmington, now Avon, Hartford County, Connecticut. He, like his predecessors in the prophetic office of the church, came of a sturdy, industrious race of men and women. His progenitors were among the early settlers of New England. They figured nobly in the American Revolution and naturally transmitted a posterity a love of liberty and traits which go to make patriots and martyrs. I don't like it when they harp too much on their ancestry. I don't think it's nearly as important as people seem to think it is sometimes. But realize that the only people who think that always have a pristine ancestry. Ancestry, not so important. Alright, it has more to do with what you do with it. Wilford Woodruff possessed all these admirable qualities of character which were crowned with a veneration for God and strong religious element in his being. This led him in early youth to the consideration of spiritual subjects. He was also very industrious. His father, Affec? How do you say that? It sounds almost like a bad word. Affec Woodruff was a miller, and Wilford assisted him in running the Farmington grist mills, and though tender in years, proved himself a man in thought and labor. From 1827 to 1832, he took charge of a flour mill for his aunt. Although religious, he did not join any denomination until he was 26 years of age, because he found none which harmonized in doctrine and organization with the Church of Christ as described in the New Testament. When only a boy, he would ask his Sunday school teacher why there were no apostles and prophets in this age, as in olden times. The answer he received only tended to disgust him with sectarianism. It was the same old story. Apostles and prophets are all done away with because they're no longer needed. And yet, with all the learning of modern ministers, they were unable to come to a unity of the faith as taught by the Savior and his disciples. Under these circumstances, Wilford Woodruff could only turn to the Lord in prayer for guidance, and find comfort in reading and believing the prophecies and doctrines of the Holy Bible. In 1832, he felt a strong inspiration to go to Rhode Island. Why, he did not know. And having already arranged to remove with his brother Asmund Woodruff to Richland, Oswego County, New York, he did not heed the inspiration to visit Rhode Island, but moved to the state of New York. Okay, so he had this strong feeling, but then he didn't do it? So it makes me wonder what would have happened, yeah? They purchased a farm and sawmill, settling down to the business of farming and milling. In December 1833, over a year from the time they left Connecticut, 2 Mormon elders, Zerah Pulsifer and Elijah Cheney, came to that section of country, preaching that an angel had visited the earth, restored the everlasting gospel, and that Joseph Smith was a prophet of the Lord. Wilford and Asmund Woodruff, who went to hear them preach, immediately received a testimony of the genuineness of their message and offered themselves for baptism. Well, that's kind of cool. He, just immediately having that feeling. Several other general authorities, including Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball, both took 2 years to think about it and pray about it and really decide. But Wilford Woodruff was just like, no, it's true. I know it's true. He's an all or nothing kind of guy, yeah? Here's a picture of him. This is a terrible picture of him, and you really can't recognize him. He has very wide cheekbones and very piercing eyes, but it does not come across in this picture at all. So hopefully you'll be seeing better ones in the background. Wilford was baptized December 31st, gosh, it must have been cold, 1833, by Zerah Pulsifer. Brother Woodruff now learned that at that time he received the impression to visit Rhode Island. There were elders preaching in that state, and had he gone there, the opportunity to receive the gospel would have been afforded him 1 year earlier. Would it, though? Because there were elders there doesn't mean that he would have run into them. Rhode Island might seem small compared to other states. It's still not tiny, as far as a single person going there. I don't know. I'm a bit skeptical. From the time of his baptism until he departed for a better sphere, Wilford Woodruff proved by a life of devotion to the cause of God that he was grateful for his existence in this age of the world. A branch of the church was organized in Richland, January 2nd, 1834, and Brother Woodruff was ordained a teacher. During this winter, Elder Parley P. Pratt and others visited Richland. Elder Pratt became much impressed with Brother Woodruff and immediately told him that his duty was to repair to Kirtland, join Zion's camp, and go with that body to Missouri. He took this counsel, closed his business in Richland, and left for Kirtland, where he arrived April 25th, 1834. He was invited to be the guest of the prophet Joseph Smith, which invitation he accepted, and he had a glorious time in his acquaintance with the prophet and other leading men of the church. He started with Zion's camp for Missouri May 1st, 1834. I forgot that he was part of Zion's camp. I did know that, though. Which journey was accomplished with considerable hardship, but throughout all the varied experiences incidental to the journey, Wilford Woodruff was, like Caleb and Joshua, among the number who sustained the prophet, and never complained nor murmured because of trial and privation. After accomplishing all that could be done as a body, the prophet advised the young men without families to remain in Missouri. Brother Woodruff sojourned with Lyman White in Clay County, spending the summer quarrying rock, cutting wheat, making brick, and doing other kinds of hard manual labor. Sounds like him. He was a roll-up-your-sleeves kind of guy. Yeah. During this time, he was possessed of a strong desire to go into the world and preach the gospel, but did not express his desires lest he should be considered aspiring, this being farthest from his humble, unassuming disposition. The Lord, however, knew the honest desire of his heart, and one day, while walking along the road, he was met by one of the leading elders in that section, who said to him in substance, "Brother Woodruff, it is the will of the Lord that you should be ordained a priest and go on a mission." Brother Woodruff answered, "I'm ready." He was ordained a priest and went on a mission to Arkansas and Tennessee in the fall of 1834. Well, that's kind of cool. On this mission, he was grossly assailed by an apostate named Achaman, who, when Brother Woodruff was leaving his premises, came towards him in a savage manner as if to do him violence, when the apostate suddenly fell dead at his feet. This event had been shown to Brother Woodruff in a dream, though he did not understand the full import until it was fulfilled. Oh, that's interesting. So he had a dream that would happen, and then it did? That's always weird when that happens, but yeah, it's kind of cool. He and companion traveled on foot without purse or scrip, and on their journeyings, they passed through Jackson County, Missouri, where it was dangerous for a Latter-day Saint to be seen. Yeah, I'm surprised they went there. They were frequently preserved in a providential manner from mobocrats. Brother Woodruff's first attempt at preaching was at a tavern one Sunday in December 1834. He was weary from a long walk through mud and slush, but the people desired to hear him. He enjoyed the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, seeking with freedom and power, testifying to the restoration of the everlasting gospel. In their travels, Brother Woodruff and his companion frequently lost their way, and were obliged to wade swamps, and to avoid expenses would travel down some of the rivers in small canoes. Between Little Rock, Arkansas, and Memphis, Tennessee, they became exhausted while crossing an alligator swamp. Brother Woodruff's companion left him in the swamp, suffering with a severe pain in his back. He knelt down in the mud and prayed intently, when the Lord healed him, and he went on his way rejoicing. Being joined by Elder Warren Parrish in April 1835, they traveled together over 700 miles in less than 4 months, preaching the gospel every day. They baptized 20 in their travels. Elder Parrish also ordained Brother Woodruff an elder, placing him in charge of the branches they had organized in Tennessee. Elder Woodruff being left to travel alone, he extended his field of labor and baptized quite a number, among whom were several of the Campbellite persuasion. In 1835, he traveled 3,248 miles, baptized 43, organized 3 branches, and held 170 meetings. Subsequently, in the spring of 1836, he traveled respectively with Abraham O. Smoot and Apostle David W. Patton. After performing a faithful 2 years' mission, accomplishing the conversion and baptism of many souls, Elder Woodruff returned to Kirtland, Ohio, in the fall of 1836. In May of that year, he was ordained into the Second Quorum of 70 by Apostle Patton and Warren Parrish. He also received his blessings in the Kirtland Temple and attended school. April 13, 1837, he married Phoebe W. Carter of the state of Maine. A few days later, he received a remarkable patriarchal blessing under the hands of Patriarch Joseph Smith, Sr., in which much of his future life was plainly foretold. That's crazy when that happens. He's had a crazy life, so far. That's not even talking about very many years, but there's been a lot happening, yeah? And he hasn't even become an apostle yet. During the troubles of 1837, when many leading men became embittered against the prophet Joseph Smith, Wilford Woodruff was among the number who did not murmur, and was true to the prophet of the Lord. In May 1837, he started on a mission to Fox Islands. En route, he preached the gospel to his relatives in Connecticut and baptized a number of them. Together with Jonathan H. Hale, he landed on North Fox Island August 20th, 1837, where they immediately commenced preaching the gospel. The first fruits of their labors was Justin Eames, a sea captain, and his wife, who were baptized September 3rd. These were the first to embrace the gospel in this dispensation upon an island of the sea. A Baptist minister by the name of Newton first allowed them to preach in his chapel, but he afterwards opposed them and was humiliated by seeing the best of his flock leave him and embrace the gospel as taught by these elders. See, there's a lot of these stories I'm not familiar with. It's really crazy how detailed this article is. It makes me wonder how much of it he wrote himself, because, like I said, he was very good at keeping, writing notes and writing journal articles and stuff. So I wonder how many of this was taken from his journals. 2 branches of the church were organized, and the 2 elders returned to Scarborough, Maine in October, where Elder Woodruff had left his wife with their father's family. Elders Woodruff and Hale having departed, the former returned to Fox Islands in November, this time accompanied by his wife. He continued missionary work, baptizing a goodly number until persecution became so intense that he deemed it wisdom to return to Maine. Accompanied by Elder James Townsend, he introduced the gospel in the city of Bangor and other places in the state of Maine. From this labor, he returned to Fox Islands. In harmony with counsel from the prophet Joseph, he advised the saints to sell their property and accompany him to the land of Zion. Early in 1838, he visited Providence, New York, and also Boston, and his native town, Farmington, Connecticut. In this place, he preached the gospel to and baptized his father, stepmother, sister, and other relatives, and organized a branch of the church. Bidding his relatives a loving farewell, he returned to Scarborough, Maine, where his first child, a daughter, was born, July 14th, 1838. That's sweet. He again visited Fox Islands to encourage the saints and prepare them for gathering to Missouri. While laboring in North Vinyl Haven, August 9th, 1838, he received an official communication from Thomas B. Marsh, president of the 12, to the effect that he had been called by revelation, in connection with 3 other brethren, to bear the apostleship and occupy a place in the Council of the 12. Thus his early dreams of apostolic days were coming to a living reality, in which Wilford Woodruff himself was to be one of the apostles. He was requested to come to Far West Missouri as soon as he could arrange his affairs and prepare himself to preach the gospel in Great Britain with his associates, the 12, the following year. With great promptness, he set about preparing the saints on Fox Islands to gather to Missouri. About 100 people had embraced the gospel, chiefly through his labors upon the islands. About 50 of these now prepared to gather with him to Missouri. Brother Nathaniel Thomas sold his property and had considerable money. To assist his brethren and sisters, Brother Thomas loaned them about $2,000, which was placed in the hands of Elder Woodruff for their benefit. With this, he purchased 10 new wagons, 10 sets of harness, and 20 horses. After making these preparations, he preceded the emigrating saints to Scarborough, Maine, to prepare his own family for the journey. Okay, I get it. The company were counseled by President Woodruff to start September 1st, but they failed to do so, and they did not leave until the early part of October. In consequence of the late start, the journey proved a very hard one. October 13th, 1838, while crossing the Green Mountains, Elder Woodruff was taken very sick. A little later, his wife was stricken down and came nigh to the gates of death. Both, however, were restored to health by the power of the Almighty. Respecting this new experience of migration, of which he did so much in later years, Elder Woodruff wrote the following in his journal. In the afternoon of October 9th, we took leave of Father Carter and family in Scarborough, and started upon our journey of 2,000 miles. At this late season of the year, taking my wife with a suckling babe at her breast with me, to lead a company of 53 souls for their journey from Maine to Illinois, to spend nearly 3 months in traveling in wagons through rain, mud, snow, and frost. Upon arriving in Rochester, Illinois, December 19th, 1838, he learned of the persecutions and unsettled conditions of the affairs in Missouri, and concluded to stop in that place and rest for the winter. In the spring of 1839, he removed his family to Quincy, Illinois, and from this point accompanied the 12 to Far West, and was ordained with Elder George A. Smith to the apostleship April 26, 1839, on the temple site by President Brigham Young, assisted by other members of the 12. Okay, so he was called way before he was ordained then. After returning from Missouri, he moved his family to Montrose, Iowa, where he was severely attacked with chills and fever. Well, that sounds fun. While still sick, he started August 8, 1839, on his mission to England, leaving his wife also sick, and like all the families of the 12, in destitute circumstances so far as temporal necessities were concerned. To New York he traveled with private conveyance, by stage, on foot, and as best he could. In company with elders John Taylor and Theodore Turley, he arrived in Liverpool, England, January 11, 1840, having been 5 months on the journey. Yeah, but it took a long time, yeah? He was assigned to labor in the Staffordshire potteries, where he was successful. In the following March, the Spirit of the Lord prompted him to go south. He had plenty to do where he was, but he heard the voice of the Spirit and obeyed. He went south to Worcester, where he met Mr. John Bendlow, a wealthy farmer, who told him that in the vicinity there were about 600 people, including 45 ministers, who had dissolved themselves from the Wesleyan Methodists for the purpose of independent research after truth. They owned several houses of worship and styled themselves the United Brethren. Elder Woodruff commenced at once to lay before these people the truth as God had revealed it to the prophet Joseph Smith, bearing witness as an apostle of the Lord to the ministry of angels, and the complete restoration of the ancient gospel in these last days. The ministry of Elder Woodruff was not attended with the eloquence of speech, nor the well-skilled argument which attended the labors of some men, but there was an earnestness in his talk and movement, and an honest, straightforward, God-like simplicity in his plain statement of truth, accompanied by the influence of the Holy Spirit, which carried early conviction to the hearts of all who were honestly seeking after truth. Through 8 months' labor, chiefly by Elder Woodruff in Herefordshire, Worcestershire, and Gloucestershire, I think that's how you say it, 1,800 people were brought into the church. This included 600 United Brethren, all but one. 2 large conferences were organized. On August 40th, August 40th. That's a great date, isn't it? It's my favorite. No, I'm kidding. Okay, in August 1840, he accompanied Elders Heber C. Kimball and George A. Smith to London, where they introduced the gospel under very difficult circumstances. The first convert in London was baptized August 31st, 1840. Elder Woodruff remained in London but a short time. When he returned to Herefordshire and Staffordshire, they're just messing with me now, strengthening the saints. I'm sorry. Like the way that you have to pronounce it, I'm sure I'm messing it up, but like I'm doing my best, yeah? Like that's as best as I could do. From thence he attended conference in Manchester, I'm pretty sure that's right, and labored most of the following winter in London, visiting also several other parts of the country. While in England, the adversary made desperate efforts to impede the progress of the elders in their ministry. At one time, evil spirits attacked Apostle Woodruff and Smith. in a literal manner, when, by the exercise of faith and the authority of God by these brethren, these spirits departed. Brother Woodruff saw them as literally as he could see the physical being of people tabernacled in the flesh. After a very prosperous mission, he returned to America, arriving in New York, May 20th, 1841. He met his wife at Scarborough, Maine, after 2 years' absence. A month later, they returned to Nauvoo, where they were heartily welcomed by the prophet Joseph Smith. Brother Woodruff became a member of the City Council of Nauvoo and served the interests of that city with energy and efficiency. His time during the winter of 1841-42 was mainly occupied in attending meetings and performing manual labor. In February 1842, he became the business manager of the Times and Seasons. In July of the same year, he went on a mission to the eastern states for the purpose of collecting funds to further the building of the temple in Nauvoo House. He returned to Nauvoo November 4th, and again spent the winter in Nauvoo and much of the ensuing year. He received his endowments in the Nauvoo temple under the direction of the prophet Joseph Smith. He built a brick dwelling for himself and family on a lot given him by the prophet Joseph. In the spring of 1844, he was called on another mission to the eastern states. When about to take passage on a steamer from Portland, Maine, to Fox Islands, he learned of the martyrdom of Joseph and Hiram Smith. He immediately went to Boston and met in council with the 12, and with them returned to Nauvoo, where he arrived August 6, 1844, and took part with his brethren of the 12 in presiding over the affairs of the church. Wilford Woodruff was a personal witness to the power of God as it rested upon President Brigham Young on the occasion when the latter was transfigured in the presence of the people, so that he appeared in person and spoke as with the voice of the prophet Joseph Smith. August 12, 1841, Apostle Woodruff was called to preside over this British mission. He left Nauvoo August 28, 1844, and reached Liverpool January 3, 1845. He presided with ability and much industry over the mission about 1 year, when he returned to Nauvoo early in 1846, just in time to participate with the saints in their great exodus from Illinois. He, with many others, left their homes and property which they had toiled to procure under trying ordeals to the disposition of their enemies, very few receiving more than a nominal price for their hard-earned homes. He was active in helping the saints to migrate, not only looking to the comfort of himself and family, but to the well-being of his brethren and sisters on every hand. Early in 1847, he joined the Pioneer Company, consisting of 148 souls. After a toilsome journey, they entered the valley of the Great Salt Lake, July 24th, 1847. Yeah. So he was with the first group. Yeah. President Young was in feeble health when the pioneers entered the valley, and Apostle Woodruff had the honor of conveying him in his carriage into the valley. Later, in 1847, Elder Woodruff returned to winter quarters and was present December 5, 1847, when Brigham Young was chosen president of the church. In 1848, he was sent on a mission to the eastern states, from which he returned to the valley in 1850, and in December of that year he was elected a member of the Senate of the Provisional State of Deseret. Subsequently, he served several terms in the territorial legislature. In the spring of 1852, he accompanied President Young on an exploring trip to southern Utah, and at the October Conference 1853, he and Ezra T. Benson were called to gather 50 families to strengthen the settlements in Tooele County. Okay, so he moved to Tooele with Ezra T. Benson. Okay. When the Horticultural Society was organized in Salt Lake City, September 13, 1855, he was chosen its president. Really? I didn't know he was that into plants, but I guess maybe, huh? At the semi-annual conference of the church held in October 1883, why are we jumping around so much? 1883, Apostle Woodruff was sustained as church historian and general church recorder. He had been sustained as assistant church recorder since 1856. From the time he was a boy, he kept a complete journal of his daily life. Yeah, daily life. He wrote every day. Many items of important history would doubtless have been lost had it not been for the journal of Wilford Woodruff. I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. His long personal experience and the accuracy of his journal assisted him very much as church historian. When President John Taylor succeeded to the presidency of the church in 1880, Elder Woodruff became president of the 12 Apostles, which place he filled with honor until subsequent to the decease of President Taylor, he became president of and prophet, seer, and revelator to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 1889. Yeah, but John Taylor died in 1887. Yeah. There were a couple of years in between. During his presidency of the 12, President Woodruff spent much of his time in exile, owing to the unholy crusade against the Latter-day Saints. Told ya. During this time, like John the Revelator, he was favored with visions and revelations of the Holy Spirit. On one occasion, the departed prophet, President Young, appeared to him as he traveled along a road in Arizona to attend a conference, and urged upon President Woodruff the necessity for the saints to more thoroughly secure the companionship of the Holy Spirit and keep it with them. President Woodruff was greatly interested in the salvation of the dead. Combining works with his faith, he secured from New England much genealogical information concerning his dead progenitors, and for their salvation he would work in the temple whenever possible. His family and friends would assist. He was so thoroughly loved by the saints and respected for his interest in the salvation for the dead that at one anniversary of his birthday, several hundred of the saints in St. George and vicinity joined him in the St. George Temple and received ordinances in behalf of his deceased relations. That was their birthday present. That's kind of cool. About this time, one of his choicest and most spiritual-minded sons, Brigham Y. Woodruff, was drowned in Bear River in Cache Valley. Oh, that's sad. President Woodruff, having attached considerable importance to the future of this noble son, was very much grieved because of his death. Although he never murmured at the providences of the Almighty, he inquired of the Lord to know why it should be thus. The Lord revealed to him that as he was doing such an extensive work in the temples for the dead, his son Brigham was needed in the spirit world to preach the gospel and labor among those relatives there. Wow. Many other manifestations of the Spirit were given to President Woodruff at the time. He embraced the gospel until the time of his decease. During his administration as president of the church, dating from April 7, 1889, George Buchanan and Joseph F. Smith acting as counselors, President Woodruff did much to encourage the cause of church school education, making as trustee and trust as liberal appropriations as the church could afford to sustain the stake academies and other church schools. In 1890, President Woodruff issued the Manifesto respecting the discontinuance of plural marriages in the United States, and later the Political Address, which provides that men who are called to spend all their time in the ministry shall not run into politics to the neglect of their spiritual calling without being properly released for that purpose. In other words, you need permission from the first presidency in order to serve in politics. I don't know if you knew that. Not just for any member, but like if you already have a high calling, like presidency of the 70 or quorum of the 12, then you need permission to serve in politics. This has been true ever since. But I see why. I mean, they have lots to do, you know? They can't just randomly go. By the way, that particular decision was very much geared toward Moses Thatcher. Moses Thatcher and George Buchanan both ran for the legislature in different parties. And George Buchanan gained the vote, and Moses Thatcher did not. And he was kind of salty about it. But the thing about it is that Moses Thatcher did not have permission, and George Buchanan did. Like, he just did it without permission. So they had to make a special statement of like, dude, you have to ask for permission if you're going to do something like this because you are a member of the Quorum of the 12. Come on, you have to ask permission. You can't just randomly do another job. Anyway, that's just a little aside. See my video on Moses Thatcher, it's really quite interesting. President Woodruff was for many years, and up to his death, president of the organization instituted by President Young, known as the Young Men's Mutual Improvement Association throughout the church. In this capacity, he was greatly loved and respected by the young people of the church. He attended their conferences whenever it was feasible and constantly bore to them his earnest testimony as an apostle of the Lord that Jesus is the Christ, and that Joseph Smith was a mighty prophet of the Lord. President Woodruff's 90th birthday was celebrated March 1st, 1897, by a great gathering of his friends and admirers at the Tabernacle, Salt Lake City. He officiated at the Great Pioneer Jubilee celebration, July 20th, 1897, when the statue of President Brigham Young was unveiled and the dedicatory prayer was offered by him. In the afternoon, he attended a meeting of the pioneers, which was held in the Tabernacle, and was there presented with the gold pioneer badge, which had been designed for the oldest pioneer president. July 27th, 1897, he was honored by being crowned with flowers in the tabernacle by the children who had marched in the procession to a number of about 10,000. I'm not sure why they're listing all of these things. I do know that it wasn't that far in the past at this point, because this was written in 1901, but still, like, that's a very, very detailed. During the latter years of his life, he suffered from insomnia, relatable, and occasionally went to the Pacific coast, where upon the sea level he could sleep better and would recruit. I've never heard it used that way, but okay. It was one of these visits to the coast that he became prostrated and passed peacefully away, September 2nd, 1898, to his glorious rest. A portion of his family and President George Buchanan and others were at his bedside. His remains were brought home for interment. The funeral, which occurred September 9th, 1898, in the large tabernacle, was attended by many thousands of people who knew and loved President Woodruff as a prophet of the Lord, a humble, honest, upright man of God. President Wilford Woodruff can be classed among the most industrious men of the world has ever produced. He attended as first consideration to the duties of his calling, and then his manual labors in building homes and redeeming the soil from sterility were unexcelled. Every position, whether religious or otherwise, into which he was called, he filled, with distinction and credit. No man took greater interest in fruit-raising and farming, as well as in all enterprises looking to the general well-being and self-sustaining powers of the people than Apostle Woodruff. He labored with his hands as well as his head. Much younger men than himself were not his equals in the performance of heavy labor. No class of labor, however laborious or undesirable, which was honorable in the sight of God, would he ever ask any man to do if he was not willing to do it himself. He cut hay with a scythe, he cradled wheat by hand, and followed the reaper, and bound the golden grain in bundles. He pitched to the rack the bunches of hay and the bundles of grain. He worked upon the threshing machine. He planted, irrigated, gathered, and hauled from the farm potatoes, corn, and all other products of his well-tilled land. He planted vineyards, orchards, made ditches, watered, and pruned the trees and bushes of his orchard. He made roads, built bridges, hauled wood from the canyon, made adobes, and did all forms of manual labor which came in his way. There was not an idle thought in his brain, not a useless or impure sentiment in his heart, not an idle bone nor a drop of idle blood in his body. He was honest, unassuming, faithful, and industrious, and in the days of Joseph he was designated as Wilford the Faithful. He deserved such a title and maintained it to the end. His industry was so conspicuous a part of his being that when, at the age of 90 years, one of his grandsons excelled him a very little in hoeing some vegetables in the garden, he said with apparent humiliation, "Well, it's the first time in my life that one of my children has ever outdone me in hoeing." It's fine. He continued his hard labors upon the farm whenever at home until beyond the ripe age of 75 years, when the duties and conditions associated with his calling were such as to occupy his entire time and attention. During the 51 years of his life in Utah, he performed missions at home and abroad in America and Europe, and filled many positions of honor with credit and distinction. From the year 1834 to the close of 1895, he traveled 172,369 miles, held 7,555 meetings, attended 75 semi-annual conferences and 344 quarterly conferences, preached 3,526 discourses, established 77 preaching places in the missionary field, organized 51 branches of the church, received 18,977 letters, wrote 11,519 letters, assisted in the confirmation into the church of 8,952 persons, and in addition to his work in the St. George Temple, labored 603 days in the Endowment House in Salt Lake City. He traveled through England, Scotland, Wales, 6 islands of the sea, and 23 states and 5 territories of the United States. He frequently testified that 2 powers had been at work with him all his life. One to destroy him, and the other to protect him and enable him to complete his mission in honor upon the earth. During his very eventful life, he met with a number of severe accidents, many of which would have killed an ordinary person. He frequently remarked that he had broken nearly every bone in his body except those of his spine and neck. Because of his remarkable recovery from these disasters, he reached the conclusion that there were 2 powers seriously affecting his life, one engaged to destroy him and the other to preserve him. He recognized in the latter the hand of divine providence protecting him for a wise purpose. For further details, see Historical Record, Volume 5, page 93, Toolage's Quarterly Magazine, Volume 3, page 1, Faith Promoting Series, Book 3, sketch by Matthias F. Cowley in Southern Star, Volume 2, page 112, etc. All right, I missed a picture, so let's go back and take a quick look at this picture. So you can see his piercing eyes a little better here than in the last picture, but it's still very not so detailed. He looked a little grim, in my opinion, but I think that was partly the style of photography at the time that made you stay so still. But he was an intense person, so also, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was the first president of the church that we have an audio clip of speaking. And from what I understand, he was introduced, this is a phonograph, yeah? This records sounds. And he immediately turned to it and just bore his testimony, which I think is really admirable. So I'm going to quickly see if I can find it, and if I can, then I will play it for you.
I bear my testimony that Joseph Smith was a true prophet of God, ordained of God, who laid the foundation of his church and equipped the last dispensation and fullness of time. Prophet Joseph laid down his life for the word of God and testimony of Jesus Christ, and he would be crowned as a martyr in the presence of God and the Lamb. In all his testimonies to us, the power of God was visibly manifest with the prophet Joseph. This is my testimony, spoken by myself into a talking machine on this the 19th day of March, 1897, in the 91st year of my age, Wilford Woodruff.
Wow, that's incredible. But I think it's incredible that we are able to actually hear his voice today. And that's what he sounded like. I feel like he has an intensity of speaking as well as appearance, with those piercing eyes. The way that he looks up and he's just like, no, this is what it is, and this is how it is, and I saw this myself. Like, it's just that intensity of person. I will quickly glance at the Wikipedia article, but to be honest, this article was so detailed. I don't really feel like it's necessary to really add much to it. So I'm just going to glance through quickly and just see if there's something I want to add, if there's something that they hadn't mentioned. Maybe like some like family information. Here we go, marriage and family. I'll read that. Like many early Latter-day Saints, Wilford practiced plural marriage. Woodruff was married to 10 women in total, although not at the same time. His first wife, Phoebe, stated that she thought plural marriage was the most wicked thing I ever heard of. But she eventually embraced it. So his wives, Phoebe Whitmore Carter, March 8, 1807 to November 10, 1885. They were married in April 13, 1837. Mary Ann Jackson, February 18, 1818 to October 25, 1894, were married April 15, 1846. Or August 2nd, 1846. Not quite sure. Divorced in 1848, but they were resealed in 1878. I wonder why that was. Sarah Eleanor Brown, August 22nd, 1827 to December 25th, 1915. Married August 2nd, 1846, so the same day possibly as the previous one. Divorced after 3 weeks. I wonder how that happened. Mary Caroline Barton, January 12th, 1829 to August 10th, 1910. Married August 2nd, 1846. Divorced after 3 weeks. Hang on a second. Gosh, she was young. 17? Yeah, she was 17. Okay, Sarah Eleanor Brown was 19. Mary Caroline Barton was 17. Yeah, okay. They're allowed to make that decision that they weren't that into it, yeah. Mary Meek Giles Webster, September 6, 1802 to October 2nd, 1852. Married March 28, 1852. Died 7 months after sealing. That quickly after marriage is usually miscarriage related. Yeah, so sorry about her. She probably bled to death during a miscarriage. It's just speculation. I don't know for sure. She could have had an underlying condition. I have no idea, but, that's just my best guess. Clarissa Henrietta Hardy, November 20th, 1834 to September 3rd, 1903, married April 20th, 1852. Divorced in 1853. Okay. Well, it sounds like he was very open to giving his wives divorces if that's what they wanted. Emma Smith, by the way, this is not Joseph Smith's wife. I am aware that they had the same name. This is not the same person. Okay. March 1st, 1838 was when she was born. To March 4th, 1912, were married March 13th, 1853. Oh, she was young too, wasn't she? Oh gosh. 16. Gosh. All right. Sarah Brown, January 1st, 1834 to May 9th, 1909, married March 13th, 1853. So he married both of them the same day. She was 19. Sarah Delight Stocking, July 26, 1838 to May 26, 1906, were married July 31st, 1857. She was also 19. Eudora Young Dunford, May 12, 1852 to October 21st, 1921, married March 10, 1877. Divorced in 1879, so they weren't married long. 6 of Woodruff's wives bore him a total of 34 children, with 3 wives and 14 children preceding him in death. It didn't, I don't know, like he had a lot of divorces and like lots of women who passed away beforehand, so I don't feel like he was, I don't know, as much of a polygamist, I will say, in like quotes, as several other people, because, look, he was married to his first wife. His second wife, they were divorced and got resealed later, like 30 years later. And then his third wife, they got divorced. Fourth wife got divorced. Fifth wife died 7 months after sealing. Sixth wife got divorced. And then you got 7 and 8, who apparently stuck around, and 9. And then 10 also got divorced. So I guess he had like 4 wives at one point. Is that the most he ever had at a time? Not sure. Anyways, Woodruff met his first wife, Phoebe Carter, in Kirtland shortly after his return from his mission through southern Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Kentucky. Woodruff came to Kirtland on November 25th, 1836, along with Abraham O. Smoot. He was introduced to Phoebe by Milton Holmes on January 28, 1837. She was a native of Maine and had become a Latter-day Saint in 1834. Woodruff and Phoebe were married on April 13, 1837, with the ceremony performed by Frederick G. Williams. Their marriage was later sealed in Nauvoo by Hiram Smith. Due to a loss of records, this ordinance was later repeated by Heber C. Kimball in Salt Lake City in 1853. I think that's perfectly fine. Yeah, they're like, dude, we can't find the certificate. Do you mind if we just do it again? Like, sure. Yeah, Phoebe accompanied her husband on his 1837-38 mission to Fox Islands in Maine. During some of this time, she resided with her parents in their house in Maine. She headed west with her husband shortly after the birth of their daughter, despite her reluctance to leave home. During the journey west, Phoebe became deathly ill. They mention that. She frequently slipped into unconsciousness. Starting on December 2, 1838, Phoebe reported that she conversed with 2 angels who gave her the choice to live or die. They said that she could choose to live if she would accept the responsibility of supporting her husband in all of his future work for the Lord. That's kind of a big ask. I mean, knowing how much he had to do. She chose to live and persevere with the faithful. She recovered after receiving a blessing from Woodruff. Her firstborn child died of respiratory infection in 1840. Oh, I didn't know that. While Woodruff was on a mission in England. I didn't know that. Phoebe was among the members of the Relief Society Nauvoo. In the late 1840s, Phoebe was set apart as a missionary and served with Woodruff as he presided over the Eastern States Mission. Phoebe was later numbered among the leading ladies who helped organize the Relief Society in Utah Territory in the 1860s through the 1880s. She was also a key figure behind the Indignation Meeting of 1870 that was an important step in the women of Utah being granted the right to vote. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and read about the other, marriages, but like I think it's a little interesting. Okay. Woodruff's second marriage to Mary Ann Jackson ended in divorce a year after their son James was born in 1847. Woodruff's third and fourth marriages ended in divorce only 3 weeks after their sealing, after the two young women started dating men their own age. Oh. Yeah, you cheat on your husband, it's gonna happen. In 1852, Woodruff married Mary Giles Meeks Webster and Clarissa Henrietta Hardy, but Mary died that same year and Clarissa divorced him a year later. In 1853, he was sealed to 2 more women, Emma Smith, age 15, and Sarah Brown, age 19. Sarah bore a son the following year, but Emma did not bear any children until she was 19. Well, I'm hoping that he let her grow up first. I think that would be awesome. Emma's first child died at 13 months, and her fourth child, born in 1867, died soon after birth. In 1857, Brigham Young sealed Sarah Delight's stocking to Woodruff. Delight's third child died as an infant in 1869. In 1877, Young sealed his daughter Eudora Lovina Young Dunford to Woodruff. That's interesting. Their child died a few hours after birth in 1878. Why are they talking about all the deaths? Although Woodruff and Mary Ann Jackson were divorced, he provided a home for her and sent money to her to support her and their son James. That's awesome. He supported his son financially. James came to live with Woodruff as a young man in 1863. Among Woodruff's children was church apostle Abraham O. Woodruff. Woodruff's daughter Phoebe was sealed as a wife to Lorenzo Snow in 1859. Yeah. During Woodruff's time as president of the LDS Church, his wife Emma Smith Woodruff accompanied him to public functions, as she was the only wife he lived with after Phoebe's death in 1885. She was a niece of Abraham O. Smoot. Although she married Woodruff, then age 46, when she was 15, she did not have the first of her 8 children until she was 19. Didn't they already say that? They're repeating themselves. Emma was involved in the Relief Society, serving as both a ward and stake president for that organization. She also served as a member of the Relief Society General Board from 1892 to 1910. Woodruff spent more time with Emma's children than his children from his other wives. He corresponded most frequently with Emma's and Phoebe's children, giving them advice on a virtuous life and saving money. He built homes for his wives, and he sent money to his wives and children, probably based on their individual needs. In the 1880s, Woodruff met Lydia Mary Olive Mamrahoff and Fickelstein Mountford, who grew up Christian in Jerusalem. Of course, Fickelstein. Sorry, it's not even Stein. Okay. Woodruff and Mountford became friends, and she spent time with Woodruff's family in their summer home. While historian D. Michael Quinn and others have speculated that Mountford was sealed to Woodruff as a plural wife in 1897, there is no evidence for it. According to Thomas G. Alexander, Mountford was away giving lectures in California, while Woodruff was in Oregon at the time that Quinn postulated that they were sealed. Well, the thing is, they wouldn't have been, because this is after the 1890 manifesto, and I sincerely doubt that Wilford Woodruff would have gone against his own manifesto. I'm just saying. He doesn't seem that kind of person. He's an all-or-nothing person. And he's all or nothing. He may have liked her. He might have even considered it had plural marriage still been an option, but I don't think he did. All right, missionary work. I feel like we read enough of that. So I'm going to skip over it. Also settling in Utah, St. George, president of the church, polygamy stuff. I really feel like this is all stuff we've talked about. So, death and legacy, millennialist beliefs, and apocalyptic prophecies. That sounds interesting. But like as far as the death and legacy goes, I feel like we've covered that as well. It was his journals that gave us the greatest legacy, plus the manifesto against polygamy. All right, millennialist beliefs and apocalyptic prophecies. I can speak. Throughout his life, Woodruff believed that the second coming of Jesus and a cataclysmic end of the world was imminent. On October 23, 1868, Woodruff preached a sermon in which he famously prophesied that New York City would be destroyed by an earthquake. Yeah? Boston would be swept into the sea, by the sea heaving itself beyond its bounds. And Albany, New York, would be destroyed by fire. Speaking afterwards, Church President Brigham Young stated that what Brother Woodruff has said is revelation and will be fulfilled. Woodruff believed the United States would disassemble by 1890. Well, that didn't happen, did it? Sorry. In January 1880, he received a revelation referred to as the Wilderness Prophecy, which stated the enemies of the church would be destroyed before Christ's second coming, and reaffirmed the importance of temples. Well, I mean, so far none of them have come true. So, I mean, can you say for sure that they won't, or can you just say that, you know, they haven't yet? Yeah? I mean, I don't know because I can't see the future and I don't claim that I can. So I won't say that this will never happen. I think that it is possible that any of those could happen. Or all of them, yeah? Except for the United States will disassemble by 1890 thing. Yeah, I don't think that that is going to happen because it didn't happen. Yeah, so it even got past 1990. Let's see if it can get to 2090. Yeah, awesome. Anyways, yeah, I thought that was interesting. As far as like him as a person, I don't really feel like I learned anything that was hugely surprising. The one thing that kind of sticks out to me is how very, very young his plural wives were, and it almost feels as if he had plural wives very reluctantly. Like, he loved his first wife and was very into her, and it took him a long time even to warm up to his second favorite, who was Emma. Yeah, and it just took him a really long time to get to that point where he could accept it. I think that he was a very monogamous by nature. I don't think he would have willingly had plural wives if it hadn't been something that somebody specifically asked him to do. And it sounds like President Young brought him several of his wives and was like, here, marry her. He's like, really? Fine. You know, like that's kind of the feeling I'm getting, and I feel like that's part of the reason why the women weren't that into it either, and that he had so many divorces. Like, that's just speculation. I honestly think that Wilford Woodruff probably would not have had plural wives if he had had a choice. That's my opinion. Yeah, strongly preferred Phoebe and then Emma. Yeah, anyways, but I did find that quite interesting, and I hope you did as well. And as far as, like, weighing a person in the balance, as we have talked in the past, I don't really see a whole lot of negative that he did. I really don't see anything majorly negative. The only thing is marrying women much younger than himself, and that was accepted at the time. And once again, I will recall to people that the young women did have their agency, and it was their choice as well. They could have said no. Now, because they were so young, I understand there's the whole grooming idea, but that is more today's mentality, that we are trying to, like, protect people that age. But at the time, it was not that uncommon for women that young to be married. Anyways, just a reminder, that's all. You know, keeping our prejudices in check, because they did not live at the same time that we do. So don't forget that. Anyways, but I hope you enjoyed this video. I sure did. I found that really interesting, and I sincerely hope that you can understand the soundbite from Wilford Woodruff. And if you did like it, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.